When I first arrived on Earth, I thought humans were free. They walked where they wanted, bought what they wanted, posted what they wanted, said things like, "I'm just living my life," and seemed very proud of the fact that no one was physically dragging them around with chains. From a distance, it looked convincing. It looked like choice. It looked like freedom. It looked like a species making decisions in real time. But the longer I watched, the stranger it became, because every human I observed woke up at a certain time, moved through the same kinds of buildings, followed the same invisible rules, answered to the same kinds of institutions, worried about the same numbers, and measured their life using systems they did not build and barely questioned. And before we go further, subscribe to the channel and like the video if you enjoy looking at human life from the outside, and comment below with the system you feel controls your life the most: school, work, money, social status, government, all of it. Because the more I study humans, the more it seems like everyone feels trapped in a different room of the same building. At first, I assumed this was just modern chaos, a crowded planet, too many people, too many rules. But then I started looking backward, and that is when the pattern became obvious. Human life did not accidentally become organized this way. It was built in layers. One century added a structure, the next one made it bigger, then another one connected it to money, then another one connected it to identity. And now the average person is born into a machine so old and so normal that most of them call it life. Long before modern countries existed, humans were already creating systems to organize power, labor, food, land, protection, and obedience. Ancient states built offices, administrators, tax systems, and legal authority because large societies could not function on memory and good intentions alone. Britannica notes that public administration has ancient origins in places like Egypt and Greece, where public affairs were already being organized through offices and officials responsible for order and justice. That matters because the human story changes the moment power stops being personal and starts becoming administrative. Once a society can count, record, register, and enforce, it can scale control. Then, in medieval Europe, one layer of this became especially visible through feudalism. Feudalism is a label historians later used for a web of social, political, and economic relationships tied to land, loyalty, and obligation. Land was not just land, it was power, hierarchy, military service, protection, and survival all folded into one. Britannica notes that feudal land tenure in places like medieval England and France meant land was held through a chain of lords and tenants, with the king at the top and occupying tenants at the bottom. So even then, a human was rarely just living somewhere. They were inside a structure. Protection flowed downward, labor and duty flowed upward. Even shelter had a chain of command attached to it. On my planet, a shelter protects you from weather. On Earth, it kept turning into a legal relationship. And that pattern never really disappeared, it just changed clothes. As kingdoms strengthened, states became more centralized and bureaucracies became more permanent. The point of bureaucracy was not to entertain humans with paperwork, it was to make large-scale rule possible. Britannica describes bureaucracy as deeply tied to the rise of the modern state, with permanent officials and specialized administration becoming part of how power actually operated. And once a society becomes bureaucratic, your life starts leaving a trail. You are not just a person anymore. You are a birth record, a tax unit, a legal identity, a school file, a work history, a health file, a credit profile, a passport number. Humans often think freedom means nobody is telling me what to do right now, but many of the strongest systems do not shout. They just register, classify, and wait. Then came one of the biggest rewrites in human life, the Industrial Revolution. Britannica describes it as the shift from an agrarian and handicraft economy to one dominated by industry and machine manufacturing, beginning in Britain in the 18th century and then spreading outward. That sounds technical, but what it really means is this. Humans stopped organizing much of life around land, season, and household production, and started organizing it around factories, output, schedules, and wages. The factory system replaced older domestic production, concentrating labor, machinery, and supervision in one place. This changed not just how humans worked, but how they measured time, discipline, value, and even adulthood. Before that shift, many people still worked brutally hard, but industrialization made work more standardized, more timed, and more visible to control. Britannica notes that early industrial labor often involved long hours, dangerous conditions, and poor wages, and that workers in some factories labored 14 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. The clock became more than a tool, it became a ruler. On my planet, time tells you when the sun moves. On Earth, time became something your employer could buy in pieces. And once work was reorganized, education changed too. A lot of humans like to imagine school as a neutral place where knowledge just floats gently into young brains. But mass schooling also grew because modern societies needed populations that could read, follow instructions, show up on time, work within institutions, and function inside increasingly complex states and economies. Britannica's history of education traces formal teaching from ancient times, but the great expansion of public and compulsory schooling accelerated in the 19th and 20th centuries. UNESCO and Our World in Data both show how mass education expanded globally, while literacy rose dramatically over the last 2 centuries. In 1820, only about 1 in 10 people in the world could read and write. Today, that pattern is roughly reversed. That is real progress, but it also means the school system became one of the most powerful ways societies shape human behavior before adulthood even begins. So the human path started to look something like this. Go to school so you can function in the system. Get credentials so the system can sort you. Get a job so you can earn money inside the system. Use the money to buy access to necessities shaped by other systems. Follow legal, financial, and social rules while trying to feel like this is all your personal journey. That's what fascinated me. Humans are told they are becoming independent at the exact moment they are becoming legible to institutions. And money made this even stronger. Tax systems expanded with modern states, especially in industrial societies, and income taxation became a major tool of state capacity in the 20th century. Our World in Data notes that expanding tax collection required governments to build administrative systems and withholding mechanisms to raise compliance, which means money on Earth is not just a medium of exchange, it's also a tracking device, an organizing principle, and a way institutions reach into everyday life. Humans say, I need money to live. True, but what they often mean is, I need money because nearly every system I depend on now speaks money as its first language. Then finance pushed the system even further. Debt allowed humans to pull the future into the present. That can help people buy homes, start businesses, study, and smooth out hard periods. But the IMF has also warned that rising household debt can create medium-term financial stability risks and make downturns more painful when shocks hit. In other words, finance doesn't just let humans live, it lets them pre-commit their future labor. On my planet, that would be considered an aggressive design choice. On Earth, it's a normal Tuesday. And the social system may be the strangest of all, because it often has no office building. No king, no factory whistle, no teacher, no tax form, just expectations. Humans learn very early that life is not only about rules written in law, it's also about status, approval, attractiveness, success, manners, belonging, and the constant pressure to perform a version of self that the surrounding system rewards. The government may not care if your vacation photos look impressive. The social system definitely does. The school system ranks you, the labor market values you, the financial system prices you, and the social system asks whether you seem to be winning while all of that is happening. So when a human says, I'm making my own choices, I don't think they're lying. I think they're describing the tiny space they still control inside a much larger structure. Because that's the real discovery here.
The system is not one thing. It's not just government. It's not just capitalism. It's not just school. It's not just work. It's the layering of institutions over time until the individual is born into a world that already has roads, laws, currencies, schedules, records, expectations, credentials, platforms, and hierarchies waiting for them. Each system solves a problem, then it creates a dependency. Then that dependency becomes normal. Then future humans call it reality. And I should be fair to your species here. These systems did not appear for no reason. States helped coordinate large societies. Bureaucracies made rule more consistent. Education spread literacy and opened opportunities. Industrialization helped produce goods at a scale earlier humans barely could imagine. Working hours, on average, are lower in many wealthy countries than they were 150 years ago, and literacy is vastly higher than it used to be. So this is not a simple story of decline. It's a story of trade-offs. Systems made human civilization bigger, richer, more coordinated, and in many ways safer, but they also made life more managed, more measured, and
more dependent on institutions that no single person controls. That is why modern life feels so weird. Humans are told they are unique, free, expressive individuals, and then almost every major step of life arrives pre-formatted. This is where you learn. This is how you prove you learned. This is how you qualify. This is how you work. This is how you get paid. This is how you borrow. This is how you marry. This is how you buy a house. This is how you retire. This is how you are remembered. On my planet, a system is just a tool. On Earth, systems became environments. Humans do not step into them occasionally. They grow inside them like fish learning water. So the more I observe your species, the less I think the biggest question is who controls the system. The more interesting question is, at what point did the system become so normal that humans stopped seeing it at all? Because humans do not just live. They move through school systems, work systems, legal systems, money systems, social systems, bureaucratic systems, status systems, algorithmic systems. They do not just grow up, they get processed. And maybe that is why so many of them feel tired even when nothing dramatic is happening. Because managing one life is already hard, but managing one life through 10 overlapping systems built by generations of strangers is something else entirely. The more I study humans, the more I realize they do not wake up each day and decide what kind of world they are entering. That part was decided long before they were born. They only learn the rules after they are already inside.